Good evening. Tonight's meeting of the Arlington School Committee is conducted via Zoom, is being recorded, and is also being simultaneously broadcast on ACMi. It is now officially 6:31 p.m. on Thursday, February 13th. If you're seeing this on cable and it's not Thursday night, it's a replay. Because we have members participating remotely, all votes are required to be taken by roll call. Ms. Morgan is fighting off some sort of nasty bug. I've never heard of a good bug, but she said it's nasty. So I'm going to ask the committee members to check in and say hello. Ms. Morgan, can you hear us, and can we hear you?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Dr. Allison Ampe, can you hear us?
Yep.
And we can hear you. Anyone else we need to bring in? We'll check in if you pop up on the agenda. Persons wishing to join the meeting on Zoom may find information on how to do so on the town's website. Persons participating by Zoom are reminded they may be visible to others. All participants are asked to activate your camera and provide your full name in the interest of developing a record of the meeting. All participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comment, and those persons are not required to identify themselves. Finally, both Zoom participants and people watching on ACMi can follow the posted agenda materials also found on the town's website using the Novus Agenda platform, accessible at arlington.k12.ma.us. We now approach our public comment period. Individuals or groups representatives may address the committee on items of school business. The length of the public participation segment shall normally be no more than 20 minutes. Speakers must identify themselves by name and address and will be allowed up to 3 minutes to present their material. The chairperson may reduce speaking time if needed and/or may permit extension of the time limit. Speakers may offer such objective criticisms of the school operations and programs as concern them, but in public session, the committee will not hear personal complaints about school personnel, nor against any member of the school community except for the school superintendent or the school committee in their capacity as the operational leaders of the Arlington Public Schools. Under most circumstances, administrative channels are the proper means of disposition of legitimate complaints involving staff members. The public is reminded that the school committee does not hold jurisdiction over the performance of school personnel other than the superintendent. We have two people who have signed up for public comment tonight. The first will be Patricia Massero.
Hello. Happy Thursday and happy upcoming long break, 1 week break. I'm continuing to cover the slides that we prepared as a parent group. And in this case, it's just one slide. And it's not to go through every detail, but to look at across the grades from grade 3, 4, on to high school. This is the proposed set of math pathways by the administration. You can see how very broad, how very light is the weight on the put on math, how it's very dispersed. However, everything seems to be squeezed in high school, which is where the kids are really busy with other opportunities and trying to get to college to really catch up. Most of the schools across the world have calculus, statistics by the time children finish high school. For us to get up to that, for our children to get up to that level, it's suggested to take summer classes, to double up and whatnot. If you look at the grades 3 through grade 8, which is when the group of kids that we have with our families, they are asking for challenge, but they are not given that challenge. For some reason, it seems that it's okay for kids to be squished in the summers or double up in high school, but not when they're asking for challenge earlier. It really we haven't heard anything from the administration that addresses the problems that our kids' cohorts, and those are kids in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, who are asking for challenge in math. We still haven't heard anything. I mean, I understand there is addressing it in high school, but that's a bit late. So if you think of kids, I mean, kids' brains develop early, and if you think of math, it's just like with language. If you learn language, it's so much easier to learn language early than to wait until they are in high school. The sooner you expose the young left side of the brain as well as right to analytic thinking, the better and the much more confidence these kids are going to be. Why are we holding them back? I mean, every child, we talk about growth mindset. I mean, it's learning math. It's not just about math. It's about science and enhanced thinking, analytical thinking in the brain. Most countries do it early because they know that there's just a level of confidence that comes with a kid who is exposed to it, made to think, why do we think math is different than English? Or learning any language. We know if we learn. Like, if I was to come here at 5, I wouldn't have an accent. But I was 16, so I do have an accent. If I learn one language, then learn another, it's much easier to learn the next. Math is no different. So, like, I know there's this belief that we should keep kids from like challenging themselves, but math is so important. It's not just about math. It's just about building confidence. When kids from American schools who hold kids back and wait until high school get to college, it's so hard to compete with kids from international schools who have been exposed to advanced math from early on. They have the confidence. And it's actually turns kids off because struggling with math in high school, it's tough. Thank you.
Thank you. Dmitry Vasilov.
Thank you. I would like to continue about the
Name and
math.
address for the record.
My name is Dmitry. I live on 18 Cleveland Street. So I would like to continue about math, and it's important that we appreciate that the math is a hard science, as opposed to social science. And the hard science is that it's very different. Is that this is objectively, there is objective truth. Say, as opposed to social science, when opinions of people change that. For example, no matter how much we vote for my pen to go up, it will always go down. Even if you will be unilaterally be up for it to go up. And that's the nature about math, and we teach it this way. And I think that the way how the math is, like the third curriculum, which focused on arriving at an answer, which is pretty simple thing, to go with the reasoning, is very confusing, very not intuitive. Is that our brains are wired to connect the dots. We look at our things, we notice patterns, and we start to noticing patterns, and then, there is association rule. And this comes very intuitively when we start with the dots, start with the facts. In this regards, just the emphasis on explanations is just not just, it's only confusing. People will intuitively learn things, and this actually has long-term ramifications, because in every other aspect, this is not the case. There is a matter of opinions. We respect other people's opinions. But people need to understand that at the end of the day, the recursion ends, and hard facts, hard phenomena is what it boils down to. And maybe that's why we live in a post-truth era, is that we too much emphasize the reasoning, and we really need to understand how things work. And that's one of my comments about the third curriculum. I think that we need to get away from a third curriculum and get through there are other great ways to teach math, Singapore math or other ways. And I also would like to go back and say that we need to give options, expand the Math 6 bypass, add other options, because it deprives children of a choice. We imagine that you want to be a physicist. You need to be basically to go through all the great brains like of Euler, Maxwell, Planck, Lumiere, like all of these people to basically people mature at the only at the end of life, really, when they go through all of the greatest brains that achieved on this path. And the time is money. The time is just really time. You cannot.
Thank you. Welcoming tonight, Julie Keys, representing the Arlington Education Association, and we have Zach Fahn, who is our AHS student rep. We had a second one, Indigo, who was supposed to be with us tonight, but she's
She couldn't make
sick.
Yeah, she's sick.
She's homesick. There's a lot of the sickness going
Yeah.
around. We got to do something about that. Superintendent, are you making?
I'm on it.
Yeah. Make everybody healthy again. That's what the vacation's for. Field trip discussion and possible approval. France, Superintendent.
All right, I do believe, I don't see Dr. Janger. Is he in the waiting room, Ms. Diggins, by any chance? Okay, but I do see one of our high school teachers who I know is leading the charge on the France trip. So Shanem, you want to take over?
Hi there. My name is Shanem. Can you all hear me okay?
You're a little quiet.
A little quiet?
There,
Okay.
that's better. Come a little closer to your microphone and you're okay.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Go ahead. Just share a little bit about the trip, what it is you're planning on doing, anything you think it's important for the community to know, and then we'll discuss and ask any questions that they have.
Sure. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm proposing a trip that is 9 days long to go to France in April of 2027, which is a little over 2 years from now, over April vacation for the high school. The trip goes between Paris, Strasbourg, and Lyon, and touches on a lot of cultural touchstone events, places, kinds of food, cultural artifacts like museums, and pieces of art that we study in our French classes with our students and that we teach them about. And I would say the only thing I wanted to add, unless anyone else has other questions or other things to ask of me, would be that I successfully led a trip to Quebec City last year with about 41 students. There's one student who couldn't come because they got sick the day of, but with those 40 students, it was really enjoyable to be able to see Quebec, and I wanted to be able to offer some diversity with a different location and a longer and more extended, culturally deep itinerary. Yeah, I'm very excited to be able to talk to you about it and answer any of your questions, and I'm really grateful for your time tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Go ahead. Ms. Gittleson.
Hi, thank you. I will admit it took me a little while when I was reading the materials to like actually get it through my head that this was 2027 we were talking about, and I appreciate that it's this early, but that we're looking at something with this much preparation. But as sort of in line with that, I'd like to know a little bit more about, so if this gets approved now, who's going on it, when will it be decided? And I would hope that the 2-year lead-up time is in part going to be used for making this as equitable as possible, given the rather large price tag on it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your questions. You're absolutely right. Offering this trip and trying to have it approved 26 months before we actually would have it would be to make the high cost of over $4,100 affordable, to allow for payment plans that can go almost as long as 2 years. We're looking at between 1.5 years to 2 years of a payment plan. The trip would be accessible to students who would be enrolled in the 2026-2027 academic school year in French 3, French 4, or French 5 at the high school, which means that some of the students who are currently in the high school would not be able to enroll because they would have graduated by that time. But the idea is to have a trip that has the students with the most French preparation possible to be able to use French as the main language of communication throughout travel. I just want to make sure that I addressed all of your points. And I would say one thing I do want to add is that if ever there were a need to be able to open it to be a bit less selective, it would be conceivable, given the level of proficiency that we teach to in French 2, to offer the trip to French 2 students who were enrolled in that class in the 2026-2027 school year.
So,
Go ahead.
so are we asking, so students, I'm not overly familiar with the trajectory of the high school languages. Students who are in French 3 would typically be juniors, sophomores?
I would say mostly sophomores. There is a mix of juniors, but the main population of students in our high school start in French 2 after having taken anywhere from 1 semester, 2 semesters to 4 semesters of middle school French. So they would be in French 3, either honors or A-level H or A by their sophomore year.
So I guess I'm not sure what to think about the flip side of getting the approval this early, is that we're asking students and families to make a commitment like in 8th grade. Am I doing them like for what they're gonna do
Yeah.
in 2 years? And have we done this before? Like how?
We've been out pretty far in advance. I'm not sure if 26 months is a new record, but I know that we have had a lot of trips, especially before the pandemic, that
Okay.
have come well in advance and allowed for those lengthy payment plans.
Okay.
If I may add, I think there's one part of your question that I remember that I need to answer because you asked it, which is a good thing. The students who would be able to enroll if this were approved in this season would be students who are currently 9th and 10th graders. And that would be students, most students in level 2, I would say at least more than half in my experience teaching several sections of that class this year, are in the 9th grade. And we have several sections, I want to say 4 sections of French 3. So with that in mind, there would still be a large group of students who could conceivably enroll. One of the things that this would require is that they stay in French class for the
Right.
next 2 years,
Yeah.
which is something that I think would be an important aspect to keep the seriousness and the rigor of using French as a main language of communication doable and accessible to students who could have the comfort of multiple years of preparation in the high school setting. With, I would assume, if this trip were to run, teachers who would be from the high school in particular, so who would be experiencing day-to-day life with these students for several years, if they were able to enroll this season, or students who could enroll next school year for the school year that comes after.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Carden.
Just a comment, maybe James has the same comment, we don't see her at the moment. So we had heard about maybe getting sort of an overview of what the trip plans were, so we can sort of get a more holistic sense of, well, yes, we do offer this one expensive trip, but there's these 3 other trips that aren't expensive. Is that something that we're still working on?
Yes, I mean, one of the things we've been really focused on is making sure the documentation is consistent.
Yeah.
That people are using we experienced this once where somebody filled out the international form, but really, like, we now have a domestic form, so we're trying to
Yeah.
make those a little easier for people to apply for, to take students on. There's not like we can't project out 3 years, here are all the trips at the high school very easily, because it kind of depends on a teacher wanting to take the initiative to plan the trip and run the sessions and set everything up. But what I was hoping we would do, now that we've worked on some of the documentation stuff and gotten everything into a common place, is having a site where people could go, like, built into our website, and see, here are trips that are upcoming or past trips we've gone on, so that they have a sense of what might be coming and make a decision. I do know that the Quebec trip in particular was exceptionally well received and offered an opportunity for students who maybe didn't want to travel across an ocean to experience their French. We also need a plan for asking teachers to say, I will potentially host a trip, like, without needing to totally commit to it well in advance. And so Dr. Jenger and I are going to work on that in the second half of the year. That was one of our goals for this school year. So we're about halfway through it.
Okay,
with the
great,
documentation.
thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Allison Ampe, your hand is up.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So one question I have, okay, so what I've been asking every trip that comes in front of us, pretty much international trips at least, is if in some places, if someone tests positive for COVID, they had to quarantine and things, and I can't predict 2 years in the future, but I don't think it's unreasonable to be thinking about, will you have the manpower if a student is ill and has to stay apart from the other students or stay in one town rather than traveling on, that this will be possible without making the trip unsafe or unpleasant for the rest of the students?
Thank you for your question. I really appreciate the insight and the foresight to think about what could happen. The two things that I can say to you are that the expected ratio of student enrollment to chaperones would be 6 students to 1 chaperone. So if we have a group, for example, of 36 students, there would be 6 adults. So there are 2 options in this eventuality, in this case. The first would be that one of the adult chaperones, who would be a licensed educator in Arlington in our district, would stay behind with the student and arrange travel with EF to be able to catch up and or get back home if it were to happen in the last leg of the trip, which is in Lyon, and then going back to Paris and back home. And otherwise, I would say I can tell you that I've traveled with another district in Middlesex County as a teacher, including once when I was working now in AHS, on an EF trip to France where there was a student who needed to quarantine. This was at a time where it was 2023, so not as much the same as it is now, but a little bit similar, I guess, in comparison to 2020, for example. A little bit more similar to now, I should say. And EF was able to cover the cost of a parent to come with the kid, stay with the child, and then go back with them after several days of quarantine. I cannot promise as of this moment right now that EF can guarantee that in every instance, but I can go back to the person who is the travel agent coordinating and trying to help this effort to ensure that there is a protocol in place that is clear before anybody has to commit any money to enrolling in this trip, especially if it is a long time in advance.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you very much. It's really
Thank you.
helpful.
Of course.
Anyone else? Seeing none, do I see a motion to approve the trip?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Exton, second by Mr. Thielman, who does that a lot. I appreciate him.
You're the
I need
seconder.
him. I'm this positive reinforcement. So on
I
the
need
motion,
it. Right now, I need it. It's good.
we need you here.
No, I
you
need
know?
the positive reinforcement.
Okay, well, yeah. I bet. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call. Ms. Exton?
Yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative. That's 7-0 vote. Thank you very much. We introduced our student rep without getting an update, so we'll do that now.
All right. So first up, we're excited for the last wing of the high school to be opening. I think it's opening either during break or after break.
Moving in during the break and opening after, right?
I think that makes sense, yeah. And the boys basketball team will host a playoff game on Monday, so like right as it opens.
That's wicked cool.
So that's going to be exciting. We had an assembly for each grade just to go over like the building updates and like review some like the open campus policies. And later we'll check in like with class selection, so we'll be going over the math stuff. Some more stuff with sports. JV sports are coming to an end for winter season. And state individual meets for teams like swimming and track are coming up. And then playoffs for hockey and basketball. For student council events, we're hosting a winter crafts fair on February 28th, which is hopefully similar to Town Day. We held it last year. This year we have 30+ vendors, which include student clubs, local businesses, and like local artisans. And we also have a student band performing live music.
Okay, what's the date for this?
February 28th, so the Friday after break.
The Friday after break, and that starts what time?
5
5
to
p.m.
7.
5 to 7, and it's going to be where?
In the high school, in the cafeteria.
In the cafeteria. So this is going to be a wonderful thing to come to, right? Because there are all these craft people, right?
open to
We're
the
doing the
public.
commercial thing here. Remember, this is what we do.
Yeah.
We promote ourselves.
Last week, I think we posted a clip of you for the seniors for the Blue Ribbon Barbecue. We posted it on the Instagram.
Dr. Allison Ampe and I both went there at the same time. We both got our barbecue. So
It's pretty successful, so.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. I'm
Yeah.
glad. I was very happy to eat the nice barbecue.
Yeah, that was it. We also just wanted to thank you guys for the snow day. We really appreciated that.
She does that.
Yeah. And I think that's it.
Did you get the email?
You
should have.
The email
I
with
hope
the
you
snow
got
day?
it.
Yeah,
I sent it to the students too.
Yeah.
I got a 5 a.m. phone call.
Yes. I can't send you a phone call, I'm
It was a
sorry.
nice surprise.
Good.
Yeah, it scared me. I wasn't expecting it. Okay, next on the agenda, policy EDE. And I think we have people in the audience. Would you come forward, please? Mr. Carden, you're the chair of the policy committee. This agenda item is yours.
Sure. So at our last meeting, the policy subcommittee recommended for adoption the changes to policy EDE, which is in your materials. EDE used to be called recycling materials, and it was a very brief policy saying, well, recycle. And at Ms. Shen's initiative, she submitted a proposal to revise and expand the policy so it will become a school waste reduction and diversion policy. And she worked with Ms. Olveri to refine the policy, and here it is, and they can present the rationale and, sorry if I got your names wrong, and whatever else, the rationale and the reason, why we want to go forward with this. Thank you.
Okay, and per usual rules, name and affiliation when you begin your speech.
My name is Sophie Shen. I am a student at Arlington High School. So I guess I just want to share a few statements about why I introduced this policy and why I think it's important. So the town of Arlington is home to a robust group of passionate advocates for the environment, and we see this in many ways. From our commitment to a carbon-neutral town by 2050 to the involvement of volunteer groups such as the AHS Save Club, elementary and middle school green teams, and Zero Waste Arlington, we see so many people working together to raise awareness about climate change. I think it is high time to align our school committee policy with the priorities of Arlington students, residents, and also surrounding towns that have adopted similar practices. What this proposed policy would do is outline the intentions of our school systems to move away from single-use plastics to reduce waste, whether that be food waste, furniture, or trash, and ensure that all of the purchases we make are environmentally conscious and intentional. I'm grateful to the policy subcommittee for favorably reviewing the proposed policy, and I encourage you all to vote for this labor of love we've advocated for over the past year and a half.
Questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Carden, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, so the question for the committee is whether there's interest in waiving our policy for first and second read, or whether we wanted to do or follow our regular policy.
I think we can waive it. We want them to go home and study.
So I move that we waive our policy regarding first and second read and adopt fully.
Okay, we'll start with a motion
Okay.
to suspend the rules to proceed to second reading. By Mr.
moved.
Carden, second by Mr. Thielman, our designated second. Any discussion on that? No, it's a roll call. Ms. Exton?
Yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
And the chair votes in the affirmative. We have now moved to a second reading on the policy. Mr.
Can I ask a
Ms.
question?
Exton, go ahead.
I'm curious if a lot of these things sort of have financial implications, and I'm just wondering if anyone has had a conversation about how that's going to impact our budget.
So a lot of these things are things that we are currently working on and that have been rolled out and implemented at several schools with Ms. Oliveri's help. We have recently, Ms. Oliveri has joined the central office and is sort of more integrated into the APS team. And some of what we're looking at for next year is how we can provide a little more time for her to be present and include some of the programming more often into what the Welcome Center is working on and making sure that all of our sort of integrated sustainability efforts throughout the schools are supported. So the answer is yes. One of the proposals that we have and that we think is manageable to integrate into our operating budget for next year is some additional hours for that role. And then there are operational costs attached to this as well. I think what I appreciate about this policy is that it is it's sort of not limiting us. It's saying may include but not limited to, right? So we can start where it makes sense and where the resources maybe aren't going to be onerous on the system, as we already have, and we can also have students involved in this. So what I also appreciate about this, coming from a student, is that a lot of our students already are the ones who sort of monitor and message and advocate for a lot of these actions. And the nice thing about having Ms. Oliveri more often is that maybe we can have her work with more of the kids. So all that to say, yes, we're thinking about it. We're also thinking about ways to make it not quite so expensive for us to do some of these things. Obviously, purchasing certain things comes with a cost. For example, forks and spoons. But the good thing about that is it's a one-time cost. It actually saves us money in the long run because it's not as ongoing. So looking for those opportunities is good too.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? So on Mr. Cardin's motion to, did we do the motion?
Nope, I move adoption of policy of file EDE, school waste reduction and diversion as revised.
Second by Mr. Thielman.
Second by Mr. Thielman.
Love this committee. This is a great committee. Roll call vote. Ms. Exton.
Yes.
Mr. Cardin.
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson.
Yes.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Chair votes the affirmative, 7-0 vote. Congratulations. And Ms. Shen, I understand not only have you had a recent birthday, but you're going to celebrate it on the 28th of April at 8 p.m. in Town Hall.
I guess so. I am running a campaign for town meeting now.
You're also on 4 candidates in that precinct for 4 seats, so I think that we'll see you there.
I think I will see you there.
But congratulations on your birthday, and thank you for your civic involvement.
Yeah, great
Thank
job.
you very much.
Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, you'll be filing warrant articles. I look forward to it.
Did you do that last year?
She did.
She did
Yeah,
last
she
year.
did last year.
That's-
But actually voting on them within the, yeah. Okay. We now head over to the wonderful world of competency determination. Superintendent.
Okay, so I don't have a revision of what we discussed last time for you tonight because we've been pretty focused on the thing we're going to talk about next, the budget. But I also didn't want to do significant revisions before I had another chance for us to check in and see if there are any requested revisions. We are pretty confident that there aren't any students in the 25 school year who were really concerned about meeting competency determination. We wanted to make sure that was true before we delayed any further. And also, I recently received, like this week, a couple of days ago, some survey data from members of or superintendents across the state as to how they're dealing with competency determination. Haven't had a chance to go through that. So I wanted to have a chance to review that with Dr. Janger over the break. We'll definitely have a final version for vote at our next meeting. But I had not heard from any members. I didn't know if anything new had come up or if you'd had any further discussions. Dr. Janger is also here and can answer any questions. Right now, the proposal stands as is, having heard no concerns or feedback from members of the committee. So
do we have questions or comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, feel free to communicate with the superintendent up until the time she puts something in front of us. Next item of business, 8, will be superintendent's update. Dr. Homan. Budget changes.
Yeah.
This is sort of a lone little thing hanging out here. Budget changes. Go ahead.
Sure. So, Mr. Gorski and I had hoped that we would be presenting the proposed budget to you this evening. We talked to the budget subcommittee last night and shared that we're just not quite there yet. We are very close. I'm going to share a lot of details with you tonight about where we are. As we dug in, discovered that because of a lot of turnover in the budget office, due to some data that was not loaded into the financial system appropriately at the start of the year when we didn't have any leadership in the business office, that it wasn't very easy for us to see until we really started to do the granular detail work of building the FY26 budget. We just want to make sure that we have accounted for everything, that all of the bottom line numbers make total sense to us and to all of you. And this is a year that is very important because we have a major increase thanks to the support of the Arlington voters who approved an operating override. And it's very important that we make the right decisions. So the positive thing about this is it gives us a little more time for discussion. And tonight, my goal is to provide you with a budget preview. And then I'll go over what all of our next steps will be at the end, but I also want to provide a presentation, or we're going to plan for the presentation of this proposed budget on February 27th with a full book and all of the details and an opportunity for the committee to review the book ahead of the meeting. We also didn't want to throw a book together that we weren't super confident about and give you no time to review it ahead of the proposal meeting. So tonight we'll be doing a preview. And I want to start with what some of the district's priorities were as we entered into FY26. Most of these will not surprise members of the committee at all. And I think it's important that the community know what the things are that we're considering in FY26 and prioritizing. So first is increasing enrollments at the secondary level. I'll talk a little bit about enrollments in a moment, with a particular emphasis on expanding middle school and high school programming to allow for more project-based learning, more options for students, and making sure that whatever expansions we do are highly accessible to all of our students. So that's aligned with priority one. One of our other big priorities in making decisions this year is allocating resources towards competitive compensation. We are bargaining with multiple units right now actively, and so we want to make sure that we continue to ensure that their salaries are competitive. Planning for accessible facilities and inclusive technology in all of our classroom spaces. This was a major focus of our capital planning proposals and discussions with the capital committee, and you'll hear more about that at town meeting. Implementing bargaining agreements that require manageable caseloads and balanced class sizes that we bargained with the AEA last year. And one of our big priorities for this fiscal year coming up is that for the first time since 2003, we're hoping to give every school a full-time librarian. It's been a long time coming. And then some other highlights that we're thinking through are allocations to support bargaining, personnel resources for special education. I'll show you how that's breaking out in just a minute. Resources that will support our IT department in implementing cybersecurity and maintenance of our new facilities, and elementary sections that will balance some enrollments and alleviate some space constraints, particularly at Thompson. So what I'd like to share with you tonight is first an overview of enrollment trends that are driving some of the decision making, and then an overview of what has made it in so far. And this is all subject to change, and there will be an asterisk subject to change on most of these slides. I also shared with the committee the budget change sheet, which is usually the one of most interest in the book because it demonstrates what the commitments were that were sort of taking up the space between last year's budget number and this year's, and then what it is that we're doing to add or subtract from FY25 as we plan ahead for FY26. So I'll start with enrollment. This is the enrollment projections for over 10 years. You've seen this graph many times. I want to note specifically that we have now come back to the McKibben projection line. And so we tracked right alongside it throughout the pandemic, but we had the dip that came from the pandemic, and we're back. And so our enrollment growth this year has driven the formula that drives the allocation from the town, and has resulted in addition to what was allocated as a result of the override, a significant increase to next year's budget, which is needed because we have a lot more students coming up into schools where we don't have the licensed educators required to add the sections to support those students. So the vast majority of these enrollment increases are at the secondary level. And I just want to emphasize that with this graph. So we showed this last year. We included it in the budget book last year. This shows elementary and secondary enrollment broken apart from one another, so you can sort of see what the trends are. We had increasing elementary and secondary enrollment for a long time. Elementary has started to even out or decline, and secondary enrollment has surpassed elementary enrollment in FY23 and is continuing to rise significantly. So we want to make sure that we accommodate the needs that are associated with that next year. I also shared these graphs in last year's school budget, and we shared this one and the one before it at the forum that we held for families that was well attended via Zoom, and a few folks braved the cold and came in person as well. So what this is showing is that our focal group populations, those groups that we identified in the strategic plan as needing some of our attention because we knew that historically they had not been served by the public schools always with everything that they needed, and we want to accelerate their path while we still make sure all students achieve. So these groups are increasing in size in the Arlington Public Schools, and that is requiring an increasing amount of support and an increasing number of needs for our teachers to meet in a single classroom in a school, and that drives a lot of the decision making that we're doing as we take a look at what the requests are and what the supports are that we need to make sure that we put in place. So I also want to show a little bit of information about our student to teacher ratios across different areas of the district. So the first graph here is the general education student to teacher ratio across the district over the last several years. I don't yet have this for FY25 because of when the state reports staffing data. So this one's always a little even more lagged than the October 1 data because the state doesn't take staffing data until the end of the year. But what I think is important to note is that the general educator ratio has maintained. So we have kept that ratio even. It's always going to be lower than if you look at a single area. So if we looked at students to social workers, students to librarians, students to classroom teachers, it would always be higher than this number, and that's because general educator ratios include all licensed roles. Specialists, librarians, social workers, counselors, any role that services students is included in that, so there's more adults in that number. But overall, we have maintained that ratio over the last several years. And at the same time, and we're very proud of this, we have lowered the ratio of students to teachers for special education teachers specifically. We've been trying to lower caseloads. The number one way that you can measure whether or not that's happening is by asking this question. How many special education teachers do we have to how many students with IEPs? And that ratio has decreased pretty significantly. It held relatively steady last year. I'm pretty confident that the FY25 data will show that it decreased again, and that with our plan for FY26, it will at least maintain, if not decrease, a little bit more. We're kind of hitting a sweet spot, I think, that we would want to make sure that we maintain. And so we need to watch how it plays out and make sure we're paying attention to how we implement it. But I also want to point out that this is required. If you want to do more inclusion, you need to have more staff to support an inclusion model because it takes more staff to do more teaching within the content classroom. So we're moving towards our goals, and I wanted to emphasize this because it's our goal to keep doing so. So this is a budget change summary. At the top is the FY26 town allocation. So this year's allocation is $103,630,672. The FY25 allocation was $96 million. Did I say million before? 103 million? $96,521,248, with a difference of $7,109,424. So this is the dollars that we have to spend. Mr. Gorski, could you walk through these pieces, and then I'll talk through all the way down to adjustments or proposed budget additions, and then I'll take over.
Sure. So starting at the base salaries, as we went through this process, we're looking basically at the FY25 budget book and what was loaded into Munis. We made certain assumptions for groups that we're going to be bargaining with, but we also have the tables, salary tables, for example, AEAA. And so that's how we calculated the budget increase for next year, which you'll see there, that $3,972,330 figure. So what we loaded in, what the salary budget for FY25 was the $83,498,364, plus the $3 million number, $3.9 million number brings us up to a salary, all 51 accounts. So the way the budget is split between a salary and an operational budget or non-salary. The salaries are 51, start with 51 accounts. The operations are 52. The total 51 accounts before any reductions or adds would be the number that you see there, the $87,470,694. As we scroll down, so you were seeing the difference between those two numbers. The increase year over year is the $3,972,000, as I mentioned. We go back up to the $7 million number, which is the difference, as the superintendent mentioned, in the allocation from the town from FY25 to FY26. That $7.1 million number minus the 3.9 brings us down to the $3,137,094 figure. We then add in circuit breaker year over year increase, and I'll just briefly explain that. So circuit breaker is a program, the reimbursement program that was started 20 years ago by the state to address the extraordinary cost of special education. Typically what happens is, so we receive revenue in a given year and we have 2 years to spend it. What is best practice for a district is to reserve those funds for the following year and utilize them for budgeting purposes. Typically, how that is displayed within a budget is the increase or the decrease year over year. So for last year in FY24, the district received just over $1.7 million in reimbursement for the state for circuit breaker. Current year, we are going to receive just over $1.9 million. That difference is at $156,294, which we will have available. Those are special education expenses that we would, if it was flat year over year, we would need to find general fund or local appropriation to fund them with. But we have extra circuit breaker dollars to allocate that to. And then as we go down, Superintendent, you'll stop me when you want me to. I'll keep going.
All the way to the end.
All the way to the end, I got it. Okay, so then we're adding in our proposed budget efficiencies. There's 4 FTEs, which the superintendent will talk about more in detail. That totals $216,429. We come down, we have another, so the next section, the $3 million, so we've gone from the 7.1 minus the 3.9 for the COLAs and CBA. We've added in circuit breaker, we've added in the efficiencies. We now have $3,509,817. So now we have some more things coming out. We have the increase in out-of-district tuition and transportation. This is a inflation factor that is set by the state, by OSD, that comes out annually. For about a decade prior to COVID, that was 2% annually, give or take. It jumped to 14% one year. It's starting to come down, but it's still at 3.067%. We also have some additional funds set aside for students who may potentially go out to private placement. We have our anticipated utility increases. That's the $250,000. We received that from Talia Fox, who is the sustainability manager for the town. And then we have the final figure coming here on the ops side is our department budget adjustments at 3.5%. So as I mentioned before, the budget split into two sides. We have the salary side, we have the operational side, which includes a lot of it is special education, but it's also supplies and materials, contracted services, PD, curriculum materials. So we have the increases included for out-of-district tuition and transportation. We have the utility increases, and then for the remaining part of that ops budget, there is 3.5% increase set aside, which totals that figure of $260,230. That brings us down to our proposed additions to the budget, which has an FTE count of 28.9 and a associated salary figure of $2,352,100. You'll see the net there of the increase, which is 24.9 FTEs. And then as we go down to the bottom of the math there, with all of that factored in, which is including additions, subtractions, we have a remaining $204,121 still remaining for allocation.
Okay. So what I'm hoping to go over next is subject to change. And I'm going to say that several times because I think it's important to understand that we're not looking at a book yet. So it's possible there are going to be more efficiencies. I think it's highly likely. It's possible that as we do some more reconciliation, it's also not just possible, but going to happen that there are more additions included. And I look forward to some more discussion of some of what we're thinking ahead of us doing that. I'm not sure why those are there. I also wanted to give a quick overview on budget transfer categories. Mr. Gorski, do you want to walk through this before I start talking about additions and subtractions?
Sure. So these are the budget transfer categories that the school committee votes the budget by. We have, as going through this entire process, the way that the account structure is set up, and that's part of what we're working on to correct, as the superintendent mentioned, there are, along with the account structure change revision last year to more closely align with DESI function codes. Obviously, my predecessor departed at the same time, and the budget was loaded in a certain manner. So that's, as we work through this, we're cleaning these items up. But the way the budget is split up, there are associated budget categories with different, each line in the budget. So that's what you're seeing here. As we work through the budget, obviously 25 was voted in the manner that you see it. The total budget was $96,521,248, split among the categories of administration, curriculum and instruction, elementary education, other, which includes facilities, secondary education, and special education. You'll notice here as and these figures may, as the superintendent mentioned, there are asterisks next to these because when we do our kind of go through to finalize this, you may see some changes here. So these numbers may change slightly when we're adjusting things. One thing I want to point out, though, when you're looking at this, you'll notice under administration, you're going to see a sharp decrease. That is because of the budget contingency number, the $1.2 million that was set aside in the FY25 budget was loaded in under the admin line under the superintendent's org. So that is coming out, and that's, you really, if you looked at 24 to 26, that's a more natural progression in that line.
I also wanted to point this out because some of the discrepancies that you see here between 25 and 26, first of all, the bottom line number is not correct yet because we haven't actually added in the ads yet. But also that some of why we're delayed is because FY26's transfer categories, and as you dig down into the details, other aspects of the budget don't match up because of how the budget was loaded in. So we're trying to correct for that. And that has made this a very slow and tedious and detailed process. And I'm hoping to provide the committee with a little more detail on that as we move forward and what we're doing to correct it. But first, we will talk about staffing efficiencies. So far, these are some of the efficiencies that we have identified. Like I said, I think it's highly likely that there will be a few more that will free up some additional room for additions. We are looking at a net -1 role in the central office. We have a vacancy now, and so that's reflecting that and considering adjusting some of the roles in the central office in order to accommodate some of the needs that we have on the floor for some additional expertise in a few areas, and we'll talk more about that in a couple of weeks. We currently have an ML teacher posted, actually we don't have it posted anymore, but for the preschool, it's a 0.2. We do believe we need that support, but we can't hire a 0.2 teacher. And so we have an ML teacher coming back into ML teaching next year. We have a reduction in the number of students who are multilingual learners if you look at the demographics graph on our focal groups that I shared a little while ago. And we will definitely have the staffing available to allocate the teachers that we have to support the preschool next year, and we currently are doing that. And so the preschool is getting ML support, but we don't need to add staff in order to do that, so we're taking that out of the budget. It was budgeted in FY25. And because of an addition that we're doing to make sure that every school has a fully licensed librarian, we are also doing a reduction to library paraprofessionals. What the allocation will look like for library paras for next year will be 2 days a week at the elementary level, 2.5 at the middle level, and a full-time paraprofessional at the high school level. And we're going to work with everybody to make sure that there's not a need for anyone to not have a full-time role in the system. We certainly have plenty of para support required, but we do want to prioritize having full-time librarians in every school at the moment. So here are additions. I'm going to go by high school first, then middle, elementary, and then operational. So for staffing at the high school, we are looking forward to adding 6 teachers across content areas in order to expand sections in academic areas. The high school is in need of an additional dean with the number of students that it is welcoming now into our beautiful new spaces. And so that request is currently on the approved list. We're really excited about adding a potential media class to replace some of the extracurriculars that we aren't able to offer anymore. ACMi has not had the staffing for this, and so this is in an effort to support some collaboration with ACMi and programming with ACMi. It would add a course to the program of studies that is currently in the program of studies, and we do have someone who has worked directly with ACMi who'd be interested in teaching that class. Of course, we'll post it. And so that role is added in as well. School counselor at Arlington High School, this would bring the caseload levels to within a recommended range, and special education teachers, 2 of them, to expand co-teaching and service to our students with IEPs, and also a life skills paraprofessional. This is a role that works in some combination of our cafe and our Smart Lab, which are 2 new spaces in the high school. We do have a paraprofessional who works in that space now who works in the cafe now with students, and we're looking to add some support to the Smart Lab and the teachers who are working there. A number of our our special needs IEP programs work in those spaces, and so paraprofessional support is very helpful there. So that's a total of 11 spaces, or 11 FTEs for the high school, and totaling $138,800. For the middle schools, we would like to add a math coach. We had a role like this, and I think one of our challenges was making it sustainable and having it well integrated into the work that was happening at the middle level. We know that we want to focus on math instruction at the middle level and do some adjustments to structures for that, and the math teachers have explicitly asked me, are we going to get a math coach back? And so I would love to tell them yes, and we would like this role to be split between OMS and Gibbs, and for our math director and Dr. Ford Walker to do some really explicit work around what does math coaching look like, how do we make sure it's very supportive of teachers, and whatever it is that they need to provide our students with lots of excellent experiences in mathematics at the middle level. We would like to add 2.5 specialists to Ottoson Middle School. This would support expansion of electives. It would support smaller class sizes in the electives that are currently there as well. The next one is paired with the one on the bottom, so I'm going to talk about them together. At the middle level right now, we have a 1.0 special education coordinator. We have had a sustained improvement in retention of special education coordinators over the last many years, except for this role. This role has been a hard one to keep filled. And we understand that when that happens, we need to take a look at just whether or not it is sustainable and manageable for the individual who's in the role. There are a lot of transitions at the middle level. There are a lot of developmental things that go on for students at that level. And so we'd really like to support our middle schools with an additional 0.5 special education coordinator. What this would do is put a full-time special education coordinator at Ottoson Middle School. But that would leave a 0.5 coordinator role in the district. And that is very difficult to fill. It's hard to find a part-time administrator who's interested in being a 0.5. It's also difficult to put a 0.5 administrative role against a teaching role because it can create a conflict with evaluation. It can make it difficult to supervise when you're sort of an administrator and sort of not. And so we were trying to figure out some creative solutions to this. I do have a little more data that I'll share with you in a moment around administrative ads. But we would like to put the other 0.5 that is left at Gibbs with a 0.5 assistant principal for the Gibbs. And so that would make a full-time role, administrative role for the Gibbs that would be partially focused on oversight of our special educators and IEPs and working with parents for students who have IEPs, and partly for the entire school, and maybe have the principal there and the administrative team work together on what the split out of those roles would look like and what the model for that would be. So that's the proposal on administration at the middle level. We're also likely to propose 2 additional special education teachers at the Ottoson, a specialized support para at the Ottoson as well. And I want to note that there's not additional special education teachers listed here for Gibbs. However, it is an increase in staffing there because there is currently an SLCD teacher at Gibbs. That teacher would stay there even though there won't be students. There aren't currently students coming up into that program from the 5th grade. And so that teacher would go to the LC that currently does not have a special education teacher. So there is an increase to liaisons at Gibbs, and there's dollars in the reserve. And in the event we would need to add that program back into Gibbs because there was a student in it, we would do that. That I specifically want some of the reserve to be held for the eventuality that could happen over the course of the year. So this is an increase in special education teachers both to OMS and to Gibbs. And I want to make sure that's clear because you can't see it as clearly on the slide. For staffing additions at the elementary level, Menotomy Pre-K currently has 2 paraprofessionals who are 0.4 and would like to make them full-time. And so a 0.6 would like to make them full-time. So 0.8 adds the 0.4 to each of those 2 roles to support the expanded classrooms that we have at Menotomy. We did a little bit of this last year, and then we're going to finish that out so that they are fully staffed in their staffing model at Menotomy Preschool. We would like to add an elementary BCBA at 0.5. What this would do is allow for the district to maintain its BCBA staffing level while dedicating a full-time BCBA to the SLCA at Stratton. So currently there's a full-time BCBA at Stratton, and that person is 0.5 working with the program and 0.5 a district BCBA covering the rest of the gen ed population as well as other schools at Stratton. What this would do is have that full-time BCBA at Stratton be full-time with the program, and then Stratton would also receive support from the district based on caseloads from BCBAs throughout the district. So this 0.5 goes to the district, but the 1.0 that's at Stratton goes to the program. So it increases support at the program level and at the district level, if that makes sense. For full-time librarians, we need 3 to totally fill our slate of librarians, full-time librarians, out in grades K through 8. So this would allocate a full-time librarian to every single school. And then reserve positions are currently at a level of 2. It's possible that I might consider bumping that to 3 just to give us the room to allocate resources when we need to after we've loaded schedules. All right, still going. At the district level, staffing additions we're considering are a custodian for Arlington High School. We did add 2 custodians last year. We're also working with the facilities department, and we'll work with the new leadership once it is identified to make sure that we're aware when assignments shift. There are also contracted services in the evenings at the high school that we could look to increase if we needed to make sure that the high school is appropriately staffed. We're also doing some gathering of data around custodial staffing levels, but have reason to believe that if you combine our existing staffing with the 2 ads last year and an ad this year with our evening contractual staffing, that we're on par with what many other districts do. We just want to make sure we're collaborating with the facilities department to make sure that resource is staying at the high school and not getting sort of lifted to go support somewhere else because we have a lot of kids here. We would like to add an administrative assistant at Thompson. That is a school, we talked during their school improvement plan about absenteeism and about follow-up and follow-through with families on anything that they might need. That is a school that is, along with Stratton, one of our largest and most diverse, and so we want to make sure that they have what they need, and an administrative assistant would alleviate a lot of pressure, particularly in the mornings. So we're suggesting a 0.6 addition there. An additional kindergarten teacher at Hardy. This is specific to buffer zone strategy to alleviate enrollment pressures at the Thompson. A bus driver, because we drive a lot of buses to a lot of places, and have done more and more field trips and are running routes to help kids get across town in the morning. So we need some additional support for our transportation team. And then the last two are requests that have come directly from our town colleagues, one from IT to create a town cybersecurity manager. This role would monitor and make sure that we're implementing systems to improve our security as a town so that we are not experiencing hacking or data breaches. And also an allocation to potentially repurpose a role into an assistant director of facilities who would also have a direct reporting line and relationship to the schools. This is similar to how IT is structured, where they have sort of an assistant director who is school side and an assistant director who is town side. It would structure facilities similarly and have us have somebody who's kind of dedicated to the school system and response to the needs in facilities at the school level, which I think makes sense given some of the needs that we experience on a regular basis. All right, I'm almost done, I promise. These are operational costs. So right now, what you'll notice is that we're trying to actually significantly increase operational spending in this budget. I know there are a lot of positions that I just talked about, but we're being really purposeful about saying yes to some operational adds. And that is for a couple of reasons. First of all, we have a lot of needs on the operational level. We have expended a lot more on salaries with the new bargaining agreements that we're making. And we want to make sure that our proportions don't get out of whack, because that's not sustainable. If we're taking up too much of our additional allocations with salary lines, then we will very quickly overtake our ability to actually have the stuff that students need to learn. So we've said yes to a lot of the operational asks that are in the budget. These would be added in addition to the 3.5% that we've already put on top of operational budgets in our plan for FY26. I'm happy to answer questions about any of those. I did want to provide a little bit of information. I know that the administrative ads can be a little bit challenging to think about because we have a lot of needs at the student level, and we really like to prioritize adding student-facing staffing whenever we can. But I did want to emphasize that as we have more students and as they move up through the levels, it can be pretty difficult to maintain and make sure we're effectively supervising and leading and providing professional development to all of these staff at these schools. And so I just wanted to provide a little bit of data that is sort of behind some of what I'm thinking through as we move forward. I have provided the school committee with the full list of asks, and as well as what's been approved and what hasn't been quite yet from the list of asks. And so I anticipate that that will be part of our conversation moving forward. But I just wanted to highlight that right now, AHS, so what you'll see here is these are each of our schools. This is the number of students in FY25 currently, and the number of administrators in FY25 at that school. For the elementary level, I broke out the coordinators as based on like how many coordinators there are and then divide by 7. It's not perfect math. I can make it better if I have a chance to discuss with Ms. Elmer before our next meeting. But it's sort of an even division of the staffing that we have for coordinators at the elementary level. And then there's a ratio. So this takes the number of students and divides by the number of administrators at that school. And I just want to highlight that right now, all of our secondary schools are well higher and will get higher without adding administrative support at those schools than our elementary schools are. That when our elementary school enrollment was expanding significantly, we added assistant principals there. And that was to make sure that the programs were supported, to make sure that the additional teachers were effectively supported and had someone to go to when they had a question and someone to go to when operations needed some support or needed somebody to follow up on something. And so what the proposal that I just showed you would do is add one to the high school because it would add a dean. It would add 0.5 to each of the two middle schools with the coordinator addition and the assistant principal addition at Ottoson and Gibbs. And that brings the ratios down a bit, not to like, it brings Gibbs pretty even with some of the elementary schools, and it takes Ottoson and the high school a little closer. But obviously, they're going to have still not a lot of support there, but they have bigger kids too, and they, the problems they're responding to are of a different sort. So I just wanted to share that with everybody because it came up when we were discussing those additions last night. And I want folks to know that addition of administrators certainly is not something that we take lightly, just like addition of central office staff. We really try to make sure that the resources are going straight to where they're going to have the biggest impact on students. But administrators don't have a negative impact on students. We at least try very, very hard not to. So I also wanted to share a little bit of data on what's in so far and how that breaks out. So these are the included proposals from the list that you received earlier by bargaining unit and amount, and then also broken out in graph form by location. You can see that Arlington High School is getting the vast majority of the included requests, followed by OMS, that they're included requests by bargaining unit. AEAA, teachers, is the vast majority of the additions, followed by, this AEAA plus is the expensive positions. Like, we know people will come into them usually with a lot of experience, like coaches. We know that they've taught before, so they've probably come in with years of experience. So we budgeted those at a slightly higher amount, just to sort of anticipate that they would maybe come in needing to be lower on the steps. Or lanes. So, and then I also wanted to show what was included by budget category. So what you'll notice here is that student services and secondary education are the vast majority of the additions. And then I also want to point out that what we may previously have included under curriculum and instruction is now secondary education because of how we're categorizing positions at the school level. And finally, I thought I had some non-included. What's next? So we're planning on doing a budget proposal to school committee on February 27th, having a public hearing on March 13th with further discussion of the budget, school committee approval of the budget on March 20th, and presentation to finance committee on March 27th. And the budget budget subcommittee would meet throughout, and we will schedule those with Dr. Allison Ampe as soon as we can. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions about where we're at right now, and I look forward to getting a book buttoned up and ready to go for our next meeting.
Before we go any further and entertain discussion on the part of the committee, this timeline will require a special meeting on the 20th of March, so I'd like to have a motion to schedule a special meeting of the school committee on March 20th at 6:30 p.m. in this beautiful room. Motion by Mr. Thielman. Now, who's going to
Did you
second
do
it?
the second?
No, Ms. Exton will second.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Roll call vote. Ms. Exton.
Yes.
Mr. Carden.
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson.
Yes.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Chair votes the affirmative. That's 7-0. We're scheduled for the 20th. Depending on what we do, we could have a very short meeting on the 27th. We could not have a meeting on the 27th, but we'll determine that later. It's easier to cancel than schedule. That's why we did that.
Yeah, I just
Yes.
had a clarification. The 27th is the finance committee, so,
28th.
Friday the 28th?
Oh, no, the 27th is, wait a minute, those are
Those are-
Thursdays. Hold
yeah.
on, Kersey. Dr. Allison Ampe.
Okay, I don't know if if I did a typo in my thing. The finance committee, we're going before them on the 24th.
On the 24th, it's a Monday.
Or that's
Okay.
a Monday.
Monday
Right,
the
and we have a
24th.
meeting scheduled on the 27th.
Okay, so Finance Committee is the 20th, and our subsequent meeting will be the 27th.
No, Finance Committee is the 24th.
24th.
The finance.
We
committee-
meet the 20th. Finance Committee is Monday, the 24th.
Then we meet
We
again on
meet
the
again on the
27th.
27th.
Yes.
That's the current schedule as planned. Okay, now on the budget, who'd like to, we'll start with Dr. Allison Ampe because she's the chair of the subcommittee, and I'm sure she has interesting things to tell us.
I don't actually.
Okay.
But, I mean, we appreciate all the effort the superintendent has put into this, and she did more of a presentation than we were expecting today. We'll work with her in terms of what we need in 2 weeks when we have the full budget book. But I'd like to see the final thing before I make lots of.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Carden?
First, a question. So for the teacher salaries, it looks like we used 75,000 for all the positions except the librarians and the reserve positions.
Yeah, so when I was doing the calculations in the sheet so there's sort of two layers to the process here. There was what we did with cabinet, and I used a conservative estimate there because I wanted to make sure we still had room and that I didn't over-yes things. So that's where I used the higher rate. We used 85,000 there, and 75,000. I could easily anticipate, say, math coach salaries at about 85,000. I think we know there will be salary savings associated with vacancies and other things, and so I think it's also okay to budget it at 75. Putting this list together quickly for us today, because we were still making sure bottom lines felt right, I used the 75. I'm open to folks' thoughts on which one to go with. I had also used averaged salaries at one point, but we can anticipate some retirement savings. Like we always end up with some salary savings somewhere. So I was using the lower number in trying to get some stuff in.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to see what happened this year, right? What happened when we hired for open positions this year. We do know we had a few that came in at the high end, but probably most came in at the low end. So was the average really 75? Was the average 70? We should be able to pull that data. I know there's a lot of replacement hiring along with the new position hiring, but presumably we can sort of sort out like what happened last year, and that would be good information. So I do appreciate all the hard work. I know changing CFOs, which we've done a lot, creates a lot of issues. But one of the issues last year was again this document not matching with the rest of the budget, right? And what you just said to me again tells me that again this summary document, does not match with the detail that's in that other budget system that produces the rest of the budget. So hopefully over the next 2 weeks, we can sync those up so that we won't have that issue again. But it's sort of late to be deciding which positions we're putting in the budget because it does have to go in two places and be synced up and all that. So I know you're doing the best we can, but let's make sure we can do everything we can to get it right and not have a budget come out that the Finance Committee is going to look at, and then we revise it again 2 weeks later because we realize there's mistakes. So, as far as the positions, everything I think reflects a lot of the priorities that we discussed as a committee. I'm a little surprised at the OMS specialist being so high. I trust that those are needed. But it's a large investment. It's a large investment in OMS, even though the enrollment really hasn't changed. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Ms. Morgan.
Hi, great, thank you. I had a question. So I'm trying to look at just two things. So one, can you pull up the chart with the administrative positions again, just so that I understand what we're counting as administrators? The one that was in the presentation.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, no problem. Perfect. Okay, so I'm looking at OMS. Oh, perfect. Oh, it's even bigger now. Great. So I'm looking at Gibbs and OMS. So the current 2.5 that are at Gibbs is a principal, an assistant principal, and a special education coordinator. Is that correct?
Yep, 0.5 special education coordinator.
Okay. And the positions that are at the Audison are a principal, 2 assistant principals, and a special education coordinator.
And a 0.5 special education coordinator.
Okay. And so what the addition for the Audison it's in the chart is a 0.5 special education coordinator. So that's making that 0.5 from FY25 a full human. I mean, maybe it's not going to be a full human. I don't know. But like for the purposes of this, that is a full principal, 2 assistant principals, and a special education coordinator. Okay. And at Gibbs, okay, I understand that. So, but at Gibbs, there's nobody to back up the assistant principal against, correct?
So it's right now there is a principal, an assistant principal, and a 0.5 coordinator. In the proposal, there would be a principal, 1.5 assistant principals, and a 0.5 special education coordinator. So it doesn't increase special education coordinator, it increases assistant principal.
Gotcha. And that may or may not be the same human. It looks like really nice and round in the possible FY26, but it's not necessarily.
Well, our goal is for it to be the same human, that we would build a job description for an assistant principal with a special education license and expertise in special education so that they could do the coordinator role for 0.5 of their time and perhaps be assigned to be the evaluator for most of the special educators in the building, for example, which, coordinators are, and it's a lot to supervise that many staff in a building, and so it would be reasonable for an assistant principal to take some of that on as well.
Okay, so I guess what would be helpful for me is it looks like where we're going, and I maybe this is strategic, maybe it's tactical, I'm not sure, is we're looking at ratios at Gibbs that mirror the elementary schools, and we're leaving Audison and AHS on their own. Because basically these additions, so, I mean, if Gibbs and Audison are staffed the same, then there should be 6 administrators at the Audison instead of 4, right? Roughly, due to ratios. I mean, there's 2 grades there, right? That's what I'm really struggling with. 3 I can see all the justification, like they all sound like lovely humans who are going to do very important work for our students. And we are at a situation now where there are 4 administrators at Audison and 3 at Gibbs. And that feels really tricky to me.
Yeah, I think some of the discussion that you all have asked that we have and that we need clean data in order to have has been, what does it make sense for us to have a whole one of regardless of the number of kids in a building, and what does it make sense for us to staff based on ratios? I think this, having some of this data, this is easy enough for me to calculate because I know who the administrators are. There aren't very many of them. I can tell you that when you look at, for example, students to paraprofessionals, students to teachers, students to special educators, students to all sorts of roles in our schools, the high schools and Audisons are always higher. There's always more kids to adults at those 2 schools. And it's generally higher also at Gibbs. And it's always significantly lower at the elementary level. Age has something to do with that. So ratios are useful, and we want to have a full-time librarian at every school. And the ratio of librarians to students at the high school is obviously wildly different than the ratio will be of librarians to students at each elementary school. So I think it's useful to look at, so I wanted to provide it, and also the question came up. And it's also really difficult to find a 0.5 something in a lot of roles. I think librarians are one of them. APs are one of them. Administrative assistants is one. We always think about when we put a partial role in whether or not we're going to be able to fill it. And part of our rationale for Gibbs is to think about what can we fill and what level of support makes the most sense for making sure that whoever is in that role stays in that role, because we've had such turnover in the coordinators in the past. And we're also thinking about what some of the constraints are that we've experienced. Gibbs does the Nature's Classroom trip. They bring a group in and out pretty swiftly. And while that is true of all of our schools do 2 transitions. They're the only ones who do it with the same group of students at the same time. And that has a lot of logistics attached to it that are difficult to keep track of while also monitoring instruction. And so, when you look at ratios, I hear you. It doesn't, if you math it all the way up and say this should be an equal ratio, then yes, we would have a lot of administrators at the high school. Our teachers have said we want a dean because we need more support. And I think they only tell part of the story. And I wouldn't necessarily advocate for 10 administrators at the high school. So it's a worthwhile
totally.
discussion to have.
Yeah, the Gibbs Audison piece is true. I hear what you're saying, and I'm still thinking about that part because that one is tough for me, because having 3 administrators at Gibbs and 4 at Audison when there's 2 grades of kids at the Audison and 1 grade of kid at the Gibbs, it's a really tough elevator pitch, right? To be like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense. So we can keep talking about that. I had a question about the special educators at the Audison. It looks like from the budget request list, so it looks like there are 2 special education teachers at the Audison. However, looking at the request list, it looks as though one of them is going to be the SLCD teacher. Is that correct? Or is that person being added additionally?
Yes, so that is SLCD at OMS. And the other one is, I just put it as 2 teachers, but the other one is a liaison for an LC that currently does not have one.
So, but we're not getting 2 liaisons.
No, that request staffed this way is 1 SLC, 1 liaison.
Okay. So basically, the SLC teacher with SLCD isn't going to move with the kids. They are going to stay at the Gibbs.
Yes, that's how that would, the personnel piece, that comes later. So I always am very clear with folks, like, this is positions, not personnel.
Yeah. Okay.
But that position stays at the Gibbs to provide a liaison for the LC that doesn't have a liaison. So both schools would have LCs fully staffed with a liaison, and the SLCD position would move to the Audison.
Okay. But does that 1.0 teacher, liaison teacher, does that really help us with those co-taught classes where we have so many kids? Like I'm having a hard time, because I'm all for the SLCD teacher, right? Like, yes, but like, it's not really 2 special education teachers. One of them is allocated to a program, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really only 1 more human. And given what we've seen in terms of these class sizes and the distribution of students with IEPs who have co-teaching support, is that 1 person really going to make that big of a difference to fix that?
I'm going to ask Ms. Keyes to weigh in because she's nodding vigorously at me.
Yes, because it's a matter of taking the same population and dividing it into 3 instead of 2. So we'll be able to have 3 LCs with co-teaching cohorts as opposed to 2, which if you've currently got 12 kids in one class who are on IEPs, that would knock it down to 8. We can just spread them into more places.
Because there are there's an LC in the current model, there is an LC at each school that does not have a liaison attached to it. And so frequently what happens
But
then
in each grade?
Yes. No, one at 7th and one at 6th. Or
8th grade currently has 5, just based on the numbers. 7th grade has 4. Yeah. And 7th grade is where we see the higher disproportionality, or the higher, like those higher co-taught classes.
Yeah.
It's so that each each cluster has, or community.
Yeah, each learning community would have a liaison.
No, I mean, I get that. Like, I'm just, okay. I'll go back and look at what we were given. I'm questioning, it feels like, to your earlier point at the beginning, this is probably, almost certainly, our last big ad, right? This is kind of it in terms of like big additions. And I am concerned that if we don't do this now, if we don't make this investment in co-teaching so that we can actually have appropriate class sizes at the Audison and at the Gibbs, frankly, that we're not going to have a chance to do it later. And so that's why for me it's such a huge priority now, because I worry that we're not going to get it down the road. And I guess I need more assurance that a 1.0 is actually going to fix this as opposed to needing more.
I think I think are multiple considerations for why we see some of the lack of balance that we see at the middle level. One of those is about the schedule itself and how it gets built and what the constraints are that you build in, and electives are a big one of those constraints. And so there are a lot of things here that are actually attempting to alleviate that pressure. If you have more electives spread over more of the schedule, then you don't have singleton things that a student has to have in their schedule, but it only runs at certain times. And so you don't put pressure in academic areas in the same way when you have more electives. We see this at the high school too, where there's like, I have to be in this orchestra class or this world language, and so that places strain on the rest of my schedule. I can only be in these sections, and that creates bigger sections. So how you schedule is part of the equation. What you have available in other parts of the schedule is part of the equation. Whether or not you have staffing in the parts of the schedule that create constraints, like a learning community. So learning communities create constraints, scheduling constraints at the middle level, because they say all these kids take these classes with these teachers. That's a constraint. So what we're trying to do with all of these additions at the middle level is reduce constraints, create more opportunities to spread students out, because that alleviates pressure on the schedule. The reserves that are in place in the budget right now, and part of why I want to consider adding a third one there, is because I want to have the latitude once we run the schedules to say, okay, that doesn't quite do it, put something else in. It is challenging to think about how we would model additional liaison staffing at the middle level, though, because right now it's modeled on LC. So if you add another one, it gets awkward. I would probably be more likely, there's a ask in the OMS requests for a counselor. I might be more likely to consider that only because they've considered the staffing model for that. And it would create a house system that allows the counselors, like the special educators, to move with the LC. And so as we consider what else we could do with that 200,000 that's there, that's probably a little higher on my list right now, only because I think we've got some other things that will have an impact on class sizes in already. And one last thing is that as the enrollment, one of the things we can do is put these in place, run schedules, monitor, decide if we need more, and as enrollments in the future reduce, we can work similarly to how we have at the elementary level by maintaining staffing despite lower enrollments, which will decrease caseloads. So I think putting the resources in preemptively, as we have with LCs in the past, at the OMS, we put LCs in well before the big group came through. Now we're not adding LCs, we're adding resources to support the LCs that are there. We're not adding classroom teachers. I think has the potential to alleviate a lot of the challenges we've seen when we've looked at class size data. So.
Okay, great, thank you. I just, you know, I feel like this is our opportunity to do this, and I just want to make sure that it goes far enough so that we're not seeing classes of 25, 26, 27 that have, 37, 38% students with IEPs in them. It's not a good experience for anybody. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
Kirsty has her hand up.
Oh, Kirsty's got her hand out. Dr. Allison Ampe.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, my understanding is that the assistant principal, the half assistant principal at the Gibbs is being put kind of contingent that they can find someone who can do the special ed coordinator for the other half, that we wouldn't, if we found like a special ed coordinator who just wanted to do it part-time, we wouldn't necessarily fill a half assistant principal if they were separate people.
We certainly could post them such that we have options. And if we needed, like the 0.5 coordinator is essential. That's not optional in any way. I think the AP addition has a lot of benefits to it for that school and for dealing with some of the logistics associated with the school. And to your point, if we were to find somebody who wanted to do a 0.5 special education coordinator, we wouldn't tell them no. We would have the ability to not fill the other half of the role.
I think it's also one of those positions where if you have a special ed coordinator who's aspiring to move into the principalship at some point, that's a good step-up position for them. Ms. Exton, followed by Mr. Thielman.
Thank you.
So I'm also looking at the administrator per school chart, and I realize that there are a lot of sort of asterisks around things, but I just feel like it would be hard for me to move on from tonight without highlighting the number at Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like all the other elementary schools are, with the exception of Stratton and Thompson, are like within 5 of each other than Pierce. So I guess I'm just curious, what would it take to get Thompson to 3.0, or was that in the asks in some capacity that didn't get filled? Are there positions that are not on this specific chart that do sort of alleviate some of the stressors there? Because that number really...
So the kindergarten position is explicitly meant to reduce enrollment at Thompson over time. The kindergarten at Hardy is a buffer zone strategy to swing students. No student will get placed in K at Thompson at the start of the process. I do have to decide buffer zone strategy at the beginning. And last year, we budgeted a certain number of sections. I was trying to maintain that number of sections, and so we didn't do that swing. I didn't say yes to all of the kids who asked for Thompson, for sure, but we filled the sections that we had in place. We're explicitly strategically placing an additional kindergarten section at Hardy with an addition to the budget this year so that we can alleviate pressure elsewhere. We're also not reducing a section at Pierce. So you'll notice there's not a reduction at Pierce right now. Yeah. Pierce would have a reduction if we budgeted to projection right now. So what this is going to allow for is what I think are very reasonable class sizes in kindergarten across the district, and making sure that we are strategically moving kids away from Stratton, which has a large kindergarten section right now, away from Thompson to Hardy, and balancing things out across the district. Now that has later ramifications because that section then carries, but we can take a look at grades 2 and 3, and if those sections are small and we want to shed a section to put more at kindergarten, we can do that. But over time, that's the goal, is to get Thompson's enrollment down. The administrative assistant, when we talked about it last night, was a shared role with the district. It's not anymore. I would like to fill that at 0.6. It was going to be 0.5, 0.5. I've spoken with both leaders today, and the 0.5 that was going to be a district role, it was proposed that way, would turn into a stipend. We would have a stipend allocation for that, and have maybe some teachers who want to do liaison work with families fill those stipend roles. And we instead want to give a dedicated 0.6 administrative assistant to Thompson to help with some of the logistics that come along with running a school that size, at least while the enrollment is that high. So we have taken that into account. It's not reflected here because it's not an administrator, but it's a similar strain that they experience because of the size of the school.
Okay. But a lot of sort of what you've highlighted for some of these other ratios is the, like, you know, evaluator to teacher ratio. And so again, I just look at that and think about that's a lot of staff.
We do have some ability to also to assign. We only recently have this ability, so I just want to caveat with that. But the directors can evaluate at the elementary level. Traditionally, the principal evaluates and the assistant principal, everybody in the building. But we have some resources we could put towards alleviating some of that strain at the elementary level using some of our director staff who serve at the elementary level, because we can now spread some of those evaluation caseloads out a little more because of the bargaining agreements we have.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Thielman.
Thank you. So first I just want to say there was a lot. I think it's important to recognize all the great work that was done in this whole good process we have in Arlington, which is lots of input from teachers, principals, us, to get to this budget. So I just want to recognize that, and a lot of work, obviously, by our budget subcommittee. My question, I just want to make sure I have the enrollment trends correct. I mean, it does seem, if the McKibben numbers hold, we're sort of staying steady. But the high school is going to be at capacity next year. Not capacity. It's going to be at our intended size, 1755 or 1760. Is the high school trend? How far up do you think it will go beyond 1760 based on these projections? And are we staffing to that right now?
We are getting some projections.
Okay.
Some new ones.
Yeah.
Because we're about to hit the end of that curve.
Yeah.
And so we are in the process of contracting. And Dr. Allison Ampe has been working with Mr. Gorski and Mr. Coleman to take a look at proposals so that we can get some new projections. And I think that'll help us answer a little bit of that question.
Okay.
I do think the high school, credit to the high school, they have run an exceptionally efficient schedule over the last few years without a lot of additions. We've been putting the additions where the enrollment is. And they've hit a point where they need more sections because of the number of students that are coming in. And so this should help with that. I don't know that this will be it because we're going to have more bigger classes coming in. So
okay, so this meets the needs of, this is not like a one-time, we may have to staff, we may have to add additional.
For sure.
Leadership staff there too.
I don't know about leadership staff.
Okay.
I think it is an appropriately sized leadership staff to have 4 deans, an assistant principal and a principal, an assistant director of counseling in the counseling office. Because keep in mind too that the directors, and I did not include them in these ratios, but it actually would make the most sense. Also, I'm wrong on my math. It's 7 at the high school and 8. Just so we're clear, because I forgot about the assistant director of counseling until I just now said it. The directors are part of the administrative staff at Audison and the high school in a really big way. They are at the Gibbs too, but a vast majority of their time is spent at OMS and the high school because that's where the teachers that they supervise are. So that support's not factored into this ratio, but it is real and it's significant. That's where the directors spend most of their time. Okay.
And then, thank you. And then I did not bring a list of all the things that we need to kind of manage. I did see the extra custodian. That's good. Do we have all the positions in place now that we need to kind of manage all of the technology and new stuff in that building?
I believe so, but it's not all the way open yet.
Well, I know that.
But yes, we have staffed to the programming that was in the programming plan.
No, but I'm talking about staffing for FY26. It's going to be all the way open in FY26.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the
We've
question.
planned ahead quite far to open up the cafe and open up the smart lab and open up the counseling office. We've put those resources in place as we've gone. I've seen a lot of districts where they don't do that.
Yeah.
And they end up with a fully open high school and not the adequate staff to support it. And we've done a really strong job of that, I think, frankly.
Okay, we have it, but I didn't do enough detailed research to challenge you, but I believe you. Okay, all right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Mr. Carden.
So just one more question. What is the additional school bus driver for?
We have the buses. We do not always have all the drivers we need for field trips, for an additional run. If a student misses the late bus, we are trying to do more runs of particularly our students in and out of Boston so that they can do extracurriculars with us at the end of the day. And we've added the run of the Audison bus that has placed additional strain on some of those morning runs. So we're trying to make sure that the Gibbs buses aren't late getting to Gibbs in the morning, which can be challenging.
And then the analysis that you did for the administrator positions is terrific. Thank you very much for doing that. Someday, and I know you're busy with putting together this budget for the next few weeks, but someday I'd love to see that for the AEAA positions.
Yep. It was my goal to get to you this year. I'm really going to try hard for the book.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Thielman.
I thank you, Mr. Schlickman. My one follow-up question, so we've had a lot of discussions about, potential loss of federal funding, discretionary grants. So is that, that's obviously not contemplated in this budget. What would be the process should that happen? We would have to meet as a committee and make some decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You would be making recommendations, and then we would go from there. If that occurs, and hopefully it doesn't.
If it were to, we would need to really consider what the positions are that we have on grants.
Yeah.
And how to make sure that our students don't experience a loss of service provision. The biggest allocation that is that would impact would be Title I and IDEA funding.
Yeah.
And we do have a lot of positions that we put on those grants.
Yeah.
Some for proportionate share, but a lot for the kids who are here.
Would it be appropriate, I don't even know, I mean, to kind of defer to the subcommittee, would it be appropriate to, after this budget is adopted, after Tommy, to do some planning, scenario planning in the event something like that would happen? Or, I know nobody wants to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Carden raised his hand.
Mr. Carden?
I don't know.
No, I mean, I think it's an interesting idea, and I think we should wait and see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. We'll know a lot more as the budget process evolves.
Yeah.
And as the chaos continues or doesn't continue. Yeah. I think it's something that the budget subcommittee should look at, but I don't think we can decide right now whether to do that or not.
I wish you were on my board at my day job saying things like that.
Oh, well, that's different. You probably already got cut off, so that's a little bit different.
I don't want to go there.
Anyone else?
I'll just say, because they usually like us to say we hate the admin positions. I don't hate the admin additions. I think we need them. So particularly something to fix that middle school coordinator position. I don't know if you guys track that, but we're at about an 18-month max over the last 5-6 years that we just churn through that position. So something needs to happen there. And as to Mr. Thielman's comment, I think we've all figured that out like at 3 o'clock in the morning in our heads, and just it's not out on paper yet. But I think we're all doing those calculations every single day.
Yeah, no, I know. A lot of us are. A lot of people are in all fields. Yeah. Thank you.
And I'll just reiterate, this is Arlington, and we're going to keep on being Arlington. I have one question. It's really a minor one, but just sort of a curiosity. We've got $18,000 for an assistant director of facilities. Does that mean we're taking a position and upgrading it?
That's the idea, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's all. Anything else from anybody else? Hearing none, we have now concluded this, and we go to superintendent's report.
Okay. Give me one moment.
Superintendent's update.
Okay. So I wanted to share that we have been doing professional development a little bit differently. We talked about professional development a little bit at our last meeting, and the PD committee has started meeting with Dr. Ford Walker to plan out everything for next year and draft a calendar and all of that, and I know almost nothing about any of it, so if you want to update, you're more than welcome to. But I did want to share something that I thought was really cool that the high school did recently, which was an ed camp. What this does is essentially it's like a real-time professional development where folks propose sessions. Some of it can be a little bit pre-planned, and one of the things they sort of pre-planned was a conversation with our architects for the high school, and so our architects were here, and they held a session for staff that they could just sort of live sign up for to learn more about how the school was built and some of the decisions that went into the process. There were sessions, and basically what staff do is they say, I really want to talk about this and collaborate with others around this idea. Or I have something to share that really works in my classroom for my kids and I want to share it with other people. And so in an ed camp format, they put those ideas up on a wall and in live time, and then they go up to the wall and decide what they want to go to, and they go. And so the high school did one of these, the ILT organized it, and a professional who does PD for the MTA and also happens to be an Arlington parent came and kicked it off with them. And the feedback was spectacular. I was really excited about some of the sessions that were held, how to differentiate higher level math classes, very on topic, chronic student absenteeism, and how do we work with kids who were really trying to get to class more often, was one of the topics. And it was really exciting to see the teachers leading their professional development in some of our new formats. So we're thinking about how to keep some of what is working this year, some of what has worked in the past in our plan for next year. Anything else you want to say about PD?
No, we are just busily planning away. We are listening to a lot of stakeholders in the community to find out, as Dr. Holman said, what has worked well in the past, what we may no longer be currently doing, and trying to reintroduce some of those things that have worked well, and then also continuing to try new things in order to meet the needs of our educators. So we're busily planning right now.
I have been doing superintendent classroom visits, and this is, last year I held office hours at each school, and educators signed up to come chat with me about whatever was on their minds. And that was a lot of fun. I got to meet some new people. This year I'm doing something similar, but I shifted it a little bit to be classroom visits of 45 minutes to classrooms. So I sent out a calendar to staff, and they can look at it and look at their own calendar and sign up for a time, and I'll show up for 45 minutes, and they put me to work. Ms. Keys had me doing some writing workshopping with students for a morning, and it was easily the best part of my week. Great fun. Thank you for inviting me. And so this is a picture from a recent classroom visit. I've been going to a lot of classes where teachers are implementing the new curriculum, and they're like, come check it out, see how it's going. This was a kindergarten class, and they were starting out their new unit in EL education and talking a lot about trees, and it was a lot of fun. So I've really been enjoying these. They're a great opportunity for me to visit some classrooms that I haven't managed to get into recently or yet, to meet teachers and see the work they're really excited to show me and talk to me about with their students. And I've had a number of teachers who invite me to something that they don't feel super confident about yet, which has been awesome. I really enjoy that because it's vulnerable and maybe a little scary to have the superintendent come to your class on something that you're still working on doing, like implementing a brand new curriculum. And our teachers have been so excited to share that with me and to have me meet their students. And so I'm enjoying that a lot and intend to keep doing it. So we have a school calendar update for our next meeting planned. I was hoping to have some of that to you for this meeting. As we've established, we've been focused on other numbers besides 183 school days. We do have drafts already in place that you saw last year of the 25, 26, 26, 27 calendars, but we need to update them with new dates for conferences because we're going to have different setup for that next school year with the bargaining agreement from last year, and we need to develop a new 27-28 school calendar, which Ms. Diggins has already started working on. So we will have all of that for you at the next meeting. If you have input as to formatting or, last year this part was confusing, please fix that. Please send them to Ms. Diggins ahead of time. It'd be really helpful for us as we develop a draft calendar ahead of time. We are planning on submitting a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for a rebuild of the Ottoson. Those proposals are due on April 11th, and we are going to be working on that over the next month. There will be a facilities meeting to discuss this on February 25th, which I imagine Mr. Thielman might mention in his update. And we're going to be drafting the SOI in February and March with a goal to bring it to the select board for a vote on March 31st. Mr. Card was right. We definitely need to do that ahead of a vote by all of you and a submission of that on or before April 11th. So we're looking forward to working on this. We realize that it's very possible that it won't get through in the first round, but we want to get started in thinking about it. We've done some tours of the Audison, taken a lot of pictures, gathered some of the historical information about renovations of the building and reports that we have on HVAC and other challenges that the building has had that we plan to incorporate into our proposal. And so that will be forthcoming, and you'll get more updates on that in the next couple of months. We launched kindergarten registration today, and the first round of buffer zone decisions will be made by March 24th. We sent a letter out to all families and staff that included a link to the longer letter. We did have a link to the longer letter in what we sent because it's easier for our school messenger can't translate really long documents. It has a character limit. And so that was sent so that we could make sure all families could access it. We also have these flyers that I think you have some in front of you that are going to be throughout town. So if you need some, stop by the Welcome Center, grab some, give them to anybody you know who has a kindergartner and tell them to register, please, so that we know that you're here and we can get you registered and into sections and buffer zones assigned and after school signed up for and all of that. I also wanted to share some gratitude to the Arlington Select Board. They are helping us out with Phase 4 parking at the high school and have agreed to allocate 50 parking spots, tags for the neighborhoods on the opposite side of Mass Ave for people to park in. And so staff are signing up for that now. It required special support from the Select Board for us to be able to do this because it essentially allows staff to park beyond the 2-hour limit on the opposite side of Mass Ave in those neighborhoods. We're limiting it because we don't want to create strains for the businesses or the families on the other side of the street, but we will have less parking in Phase 4. We're down about 50 parking spots, and so they're really helping us out with that. And so is CVS, actually, is providing some spots there, and we'll explicitly assign those because we won't have as much parking on site. And so we'll be working to message that out to folks where they can find potentially some visitor parking, and we will be a little bit tight on where to put your car for a little while we do Phase 4, and then it should open up a little bit more when we are done with the project. As our students mentioned, AHS Phase 3 opens after February break. I'm not going to share pictures because we're not going to do that until it's actually open, but I couldn't resist the shiny picture of the beautiful logo on the floor of the brand new gym. It is gorgeous. It is gigantic. It is going to be amazing, and I can't wait to see the students' faces when they walk into those new spaces. They really are gorgeous. And one of the things that was really exciting to see today, too, were the new lab collaborative spaces that are going to be opening up and the new ACE offices that are going to be opening up. We're really excited to be able to support our lab partners and students. And one of the construction workers said that they visited recently, and the excitement that was on their faces and in their voices when they saw it was just really sweet and exciting. So we're really looking forward to having them not in Downs anymore, but with us in the building and opening it up for all of the students after February break. It'll be a really joyous opening of the entire building. We did have a federal grant award disbursement frozen, and we learned about that, I believe, today. Or yesterday? Yesterday. This grant is from the Center for Leadership and Educational Equity, and it's a fellowship grant, and it is a grant that has been supporting staff to learn about principalship and get licensed as mentees to a principal, or has supported our principal staff, our assistant principal staff in being mentored as they're new to administrative roles and school leadership. And it's an incredible program. And it's very upsetting to learn that this disbursement has been frozen by the federal government, and that we're not sure actually what the implications of it are going to be, whether or not any of this will continue, but it's reasonable to expect that it might not. And so it's been a really positive and impactful experience for our assistant principals and principals who have participated in it, and our teachers who are aspiring leaders who have participated in it, and has been specifically focused on supporting our desire to inspire teachers into leadership within the system and create that pipeline for advancement of people's careers. So it's too bad. And I imagine that it might not be the first one that we see get frozen. I wanted to tell the community that this is starting to have an impact locally. However, we also got an allocation from DESE recently. I'm going to ask Mr. Gorski, do you want to speak to this one? The Emergency Assistance Shelter Grant. The materials for this are in your materials for tonight.
Sure. So DESE there were a cohort of students who were families living in shelters basically from the period of December 15th, 2023 that ran through June 25th of 2024. It was based upon, DESE released 2 allocations to the district based upon the March 1st, 2024 SIMS data and then the June SIMS data. The first allocation was wired to the district in May of 2024. At that time, I know we talked earlier about the transition in the business office. There was no CFO in place. The funds weren't acted upon. The town swept them into free cash. There was a conversation I had with the Deputy Town Manager of Finance and with the Comptroller. We've actually had the funds pulled out of free cash and allocated where they should be on the school side. That original allocation was for, well, both allocations are for 11 students. The way it was calculated is based upon number of days. The original allocation that was swept by the town was $114,645. The second allocation that was sent right in the beginning of August was for $80,765. So we have a grand total of just over $195,000 that has been set up in a grant. I spoke with Rob O'Donnell, who is the Director of Finance for DESE, to get a sense of the timing and what these funds could be used for. The way the state is treating them, they are a reimbursement for expenditures that the district, the districts who are eligible expended in the previous fiscal year, 2024. Most of these expenses would be related to transportation. There's obviously curriculum and other items too. So we now have a grant available where we will look at setting up the lines, but transportation, curriculum, and other costs that we will be able to apply to that grant.
We do have an open and ongoing search for middle school special education coordinator. If you know anyone who is interested in such a role.
Mr. Thielman, I think, is interested in the role.
No, I had a question about the previous thing.
Oh, okay.
Whenever you're done, it's all right.
Yeah, I saw your hand over.
And your enrollments are in your packets. We'll take any questions.
Mr. Thielman's question.
Yes, the roughly 200,000, 20,000 per student, did it cover the additional cost the district incurred of transportation, roughly? I'm not asking for that.
It's kind of difficult to say exactly what adding those students to the system cost. Like, we added a paraprofessional.
Yep.
To support with language needs and family needs at one of the schools. We definitely increased transportation for the students, but they weren't the only ones we were transporting on the buses that we were transporting them on. So, and the paraprofessional also served other students in the school. So actually we appreciate that DESE is recognizing that quantifying precisely what the cost is of accepting those students is difficult to do because we include them in the rest of the curriculum. But I suppose, yes, that, it's a nice offset for things that we didn't necessarily anticipate. And we also had more students as we do this year. We had more students last year, and we had these students, and the formula is retroactive. So it's.
But you said the key word, it's difficult to isolate the cost of those kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Question. Is there any point, or where, I guess, in the process do staff get to give input about the Audison rebuild? Because I know you guys walked around and took pictures, and I'm sure you have a very extensive list, but I promise you, if you put up a poster in every faculty room and said, tell me everything that's wrong with the Audison, you might get a lot more ammunition.
Yeah. we certainly talked to a few people as we walked through
Yeah.
who gave us some input. I think this first round, we're trying to make the case using some historical data and
Okay.
some of what the facilities team has told us, like, this is unsustainable. We're more or less anticipating we'll be revising it and doing another round. If we're not, great, and we'll definitely be working with the full community. If so, then we'll have time and we'll know that it's coming and we'll be able to.
I'm just
talk with
thinking a
staff about
lot of even the custodial staff, the leadership in the building are fairly new. And there's some staff members who have been there for 30 years, who might have some historical background knowledge about, oh, that used to work and it hasn't worked in a decade and that kind of thing.
What helped with the high school was the accreditation.
Yeah.
That was like, that was pure gold in terms of the rebuild.
If anybody has specific examples that they would like to
You're
send.
not supposed to say that.
We're happy to take and try to include them.
Okay.
And just an update, MSBA is doing another round of facility inspections. So they will determine by this time next year, there'll be a report for all of the schools in the state, like they did, and OMS may be the same, which was adequate, or may move up in priority.
Yeah, they were supposed to be here, right, Dr. Holman?
Yes, the survey was supposed to be going on now. We have yet to have visits or dates.
Yeah, they're supposed to be coming soon.
If one of those ceiling panels happens.
While they're here, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Tell them to come before they fix the PA system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Thank you. I'm a little confused about the emergency assistance funds. So first, Mr. Gursky, I'm glad that you pulled our money back from the town. Second, just on my quick reading of it, it looks like it has to go onto its own account. And then I couldn't tell what we can use it on. And is it included in next year's budget? I mean, how do we put this into our budgeting system?
So in talking, I think it's made intentionally vague, but that's the reason that I reached out to Rob O'Donnell, who's the Director of Finance for DESE. They're really leaving it to the discretion of school districts on how these funds are spent. In speaking with, so it kind of goes to Mr. Haleman's question too, kind of is there a one-to-one relation? Well, obviously we're going to use them on funds that are related to these students, but the state is looking at it as a reimbursement for costs that were utilized last year. As for the deadline on spending these funds, the expectation from the state is that these funds will be expended during FY25.
Oh. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Hearing none, we now move to the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence. We have warrant 25181, February 4th, 2025, in the amount of $431,285.89. School committee meeting minutes for the meeting of January 23rd, and this year's trip to Japan, which is just a repeat of last year's and the year before's et al. Motion by
So moved.
Ms. Exton, second by Mr. Thielman, the designated second. Roll call vote. Ms. Exton.
Yes.
Mr. Carden.
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson.
Yes.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative, 7-0 vote. The consent agenda is approved. Subcommittee and liaison reports and announcements. Budget. Dr. Allison Ampe.
We had a meeting yesterday and you saw the results of it, and we'll be scheduling more meetings.
Wonderful. Community Relations, Ms. Exton.
Nothing to report.
Okay, CIAA, Ms. Morgan.
Nothing to report.
Facilities, Mr. Thielman.
We meet on February 26th. We're going to talk about the SOI. We're also going to talk about the tech plan and maybe get some updates on other things that are happening in the schools.
Okay.
4 o'clock, I think. 5 o'clock? I don't know. 5 o'clock.
I'm not getting into calendars again. Policies and procedures, Mr. Carden.
Thank you. We met at the end of January and recommended the policy EDE that we approved tonight. There were 4 other policies that we discussed that are in your package. 2 of them were recommended for approval, but didn't make it onto this agenda. But if you can take a look at them, we can figure out either to, again, waive the second read or do an official first read and second read. Those are BEDH and KI, so I'll talk about them briefly. BEDH is our public speaking policy. We had updated it, and we had worked to update it, and it went to town council, and it came back. And then MASC updated the language. So we've now sort of merged the MASC language into what was the prior draft, and I think we're at a point where we're all comfortable with it. So if you want to take a look at that and give me any feedback, if not, we'll definitely put it on the agenda for next time, and we can decide whether that's a first read or second read. File KI is about school visitors. We did make some significant changes to that, so please look at it. Dr. Holman was going to take a last look at it as well, and that's not quite as urgent. So again, it'll be on the next agenda, but we can decide what to do with it. JC and JCE are the buffer zone and school assignment policies and procedures. Those were adopted when we first put in buffer zones probably 12 years ago. We were very cautious at the time. I wasn't on the committee then, but the committee was very cautious at the time because they were new to Arlington, and it was a large change in how we assign students. We haven't been strictly following all of the dates and guidelines in there as the process has evolved over the years. So it's cleaning it up, deleting a lot of the language that really belongs to administration discretion, and simplifying it. So Dr. Homan does need to take a closer look at those, and will probably send those back to the subcommittee. So please, if you have any input on those, let us know. Thanks.
Excellent. It is my intent, if there are no substantive changes to BEDH and KI, because everyone is at least forewarned that they are on the agenda and coming up for the next meeting, to move to suspend and adopt at the next meeting, providing, of course, that's the will of the committee to adopt them as presented. If there are substantive changes that come up, we can treat it as a first read, but if everything is ready to go, I'll entertain the motion to suspend and adopt.
I'll second it. It's a joke of the night.
It is. It's a beautiful joke.
I like it.
Well, I've only got one more month as chair, so we've got to keep this going.
Get a new one for next week.
Yeah. Ms. Morgan's going to have to find her own designated second. Arlington High School Building Committee, Jeffrey Thielman II.
We moved our meeting from March 4th to March 11th. We're going to take a little tour beforehand, and the school committee and the select board are going to have a tour of the facility on the 27th at 5:30.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
27th of
February.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, February. So, yeah, February, yeah, so there should be an announcement going out, but the select board and the school committee will be invited to come here at 5:30 p.m. on February 27th, see the new addition and everything, and then come up here for a meeting.
Yeah.
And the select board, maybe they'll come up and they can learn something, I don't know.
Or maybe they might see their power to us because we're just such an effective governing board.
Yeah, sure, that's right. So, yeah, that's what's happening. Things are going as smooth, it's a busy project right now.
Liaison reports. Any liaisons want to report liaisoning? Any announcements or future agenda items? Mr. Spiegel, we do have an executive session?
Yes.
And, okay, so this will be a motion to enter executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I am declaring it, and so that the negotiation would be with regard to the following bargaining units: AAA, AEA Unit A, AEA Unit C, AEA Unit D, Local 680, school bus operators, school cafeteria workers, and traffic supervisors. Motion by Ms.
So moved.
Exton, second by Mr. Thielman.
Second.
Roll call vote. Ms. Exton.
Yes.
Mr. Carden.
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson.
Yes.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative for an executive session, and we will not be coming back into a full session.